100% of us have the same problem. And 100% of us are going to experience this problem this coming Shabbat. And 100% of us experience the same problem in our own ways virtually every day. Let me use the language of the high holidays to convey this problem. When God calls upon Abraham, Abraham famously answers, Hineni, I'm here. I'm here. And our problem is, how do we say I am here when I am not here? How do our Newton high school students say I am here for our new year of high school when they're not here, their learning is remote? How do our college students say I am here for my college experience when they're still in their high school bedroom? How do we say I am here for my office or workplace culture when there is no office or workplace culture anymore? And how do all of us say I am here for Rosh Hashanah when we're not going to be here? I was speaking recently with beloved longtime members who talked about how much they loved, past tense, the energy of Rosh Hashanah, people coming together, sitting in the same seats, in the same pews that they've sat in for so many years, next to the same friends, just that energy of people coming home. And how much they're going to miss that this year when they are at home behind their screens. So, how do we say, Hineni, I am here, in the season of COVID when we are not here? I'd been marinating on this question for a good long time. And I found a really helpful insight from a very unlikely source. I was reading a biography, a memoir, by Bob Iger about his time as the CEO of Walt Disney Company. He's been CEO for 15 years. It's called The Ride of a Lifetime. And Iger's memoir begins with a bang. He tells the following vignette, which is just gripping. This is the beginning of a story. So it's June 16th, 2016. And he has made 40 trips, 40 trips to China in the last 18 years. And he's been making all these trips to China, 11 trips in like the last year, in the service of opening up a Disneyland in China, in Shanghai Disney. And this was going to be the very biggest investment that Disney had ever made. And he's there for 2 weeks before the official opening on June 16th, 2016. And it's just 2 weeks of constant whirlwind of activity. Business leaders, government officials, dignitaries from America, from China, from Disney are all there. He's running on adrenaline. And now he wakes up on the morning of June 16th, and at last the official opening is at hand, and he is preparing to deliver a speech in Mandarin, which he doesn't speak, but he's been working on it, and he's memorized it, and he's just completely focused on the opening activity, 18 years in the making, 40 trips to China, biggest investment in the history of Disney. It's going to change the company and really build the connection between China and America, China and Disney. Just as he's about to go out to meet with these dignitaries, early in the morning, the phone rings, and it turns out that on that very day, in Orlando, Florida, at the Grand Floridian Hotel, a tragedy happened that had never happened in the history of Disney, which was that an alligator in a lagoon attacked a 2-year-old child. And now he's got these two conflicting realities. He wants to speak to the parents, grief-stricken parents, of this child, and they're like expecting him for the opening of Shanghai Disney. And he's thinking, how do I do both of these at the same time in the same hour? If I'm going to speak to the parents of a 2-year-old who was killed at our Disney park, I have to be totally in humble listening mode. Soft, listening, empathy. And then opening the park is completely different. I got to be radiating energy, 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 shaking 1,000 hands, being in 1,000 photographs, radiating charisma. How do I do both? And this is what he says. He says he learned in that moment that he needed to compartmentalize. And compartmentalization meant was that he had to block out everything so that he could dial into the moment that he was in. So first, he calls the parents who are from Lincoln, Nebraska. They're at the Orlando Hotel. And he calls them on the phone and says, I'm Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney. I just don't even have words for your loss. And what he writes is that he is completely blocking out the energy of the opening. And he has this conversation. And after this conversation, he's just wrung out. He's crying, he's weeping, he has no energy left, he doesn't feel like he can move. And then he's got to go from that to happy, clappy, radiating charisma. And he says the only way he can do that is to block out the pain of these parents, to dial into the joy and festivity of this day. Block out to dial in. Compartmentalizing allowed him to be present with the parents when he was talking to the parents. And blocking out to dial in allowed him to celebrate the opening when he was with all the business and government dignitaries celebrating the opening. And when I read that story, that intersected in a very real way with our project to do Hineni in the high holidays. Because I had always interpreted Hineni to mean I am here physically, but Bob Iger's story teaches us that Hineni means I am going to be here, I'm going to be summoned to the moment, and I'm going to be fully invested in the moment, whatever that moment demands, and I'm going to be intentional about blocking stuff out so that I can be dialed into the moment, that is also Hineni. And I think that's where we are as a community 1 week before Rosh Hashanah. And I want to say something about what's at stake here. The fine art of living is taking something that you never, ever, ever would have ordered off the menu. You would have never picked it in a million years. But it's here, and the fine art of living is you're going to make it profoundly beautiful and joyful and meaningful anyway. That's the fine art of living. You take something that's never would have been your selection, would have never picked it in a million years, but it's here, and you're going to find it beautiful anyway. And I think we can do that if we can channel Bob Iger, if we can block out to dial in. So I want to offer 3 practical things for us to do this week so that we can really be ready for the most beautiful and meaningful Rosh Hashanah. Here's the first one. Get a machzor. Have a machzor in addition to your screen. Either an old-fashioned book, the book version of the machzor, or the electronic version of the machzor. But if all you have is the screen, and you don't have the actual prayer book, you're not set up to succeed. The machzor, has some language that's challenging, but it has some prayers that are beautiful, and it has some songs that we sing, and it has some readings that will engage you. And if you're alive to the service, you'll love some of it, you won't love other parts of it, you'll agree with some of it, you will disagree with others. That means you're in the service. That means you're dialed in. You need a machzor, paper version or electronic, but don't go to the service without it. Here's the second thing. Dress up like you're going to shul because you are. If you're in your sweats or in your pajamas, you're not going to have a meaningful high holidays. Put on your high holiday clothing because you actually are having a high holiday service. And here's the third thing, and this is the hardest one, which is do not multitask on God. And this is really a hard one because by definition, all of our instruments are what we're using, our screens are what we're using to mediate the holidays. And of course, those screens are rife with distractions, email and text and news alerts, etc. So just be intentional. On Rosh Hashanah, I am not multitasking. I'm turning off my notifications. I am dialed in to prayer, to song, to community, and figuring out how to be a better version of myself. Now, I can tell you something today that I could not have told you last week. I could not have given you this sermon last week. I could only give you this sermon this week. Here's what I can tell you based on what I now know from my own experience and the experience of my family. It works. It is really possible to take something that you would have never ordered off the menu and you find it deeply beautiful and meaningful. And it is really possible to block out, dial in, and be completely moved beyond your wildest imagination. And that happened to me and that happened to our family this past Monday. So Monday, September the 7th, 2020, was supposed to be tied for the #1 best day in my entire life. Because on September the 7th, 2020, our beloved son, Nat, was going to be marrying his partner, Davide. We love and adore Davide. He had us at hello. And we were going to be at their wedding in Italy because he's Italian, and that way his family could come. And we've been so looking forward to that wedding. And then, of course, COVID happened, and all of our plans changed, like the whole world's plans changed. And it seemed like the wedding in Italy would just have to wait. Who knows? And then a few weeks ago, we got a call from Nat and Davide telling us that their thinking on September the 7th, 2020 had evolved. And they shared the fact that at 6 o'clock in the morning on that Monday, Labor Day, Davide and Nat were going to be meeting Davide's Beit Din. That was Davide's phrase, my Beit Din, from the kitchen, which is the synagogue they go to in San Francisco. 3 rabbis, one of whom went to Hebrew College, colleague of Eliza's from Hebrew College, and they've been studying with Davide for a year, and he was going to go into the Pacific Ocean because the mikveh in San Francisco is closed due to COVID, but the Pacific Ocean is not closed due to COVID, and he was going to immerse and say the blessings and say the Shema and complete his conversion and become a member of the Jewish people. And then afterwards, at the end of the day, at 6 o'clock their time, 9 o'clock our time, they were going to be having a wedding in their backyard. It would just be Nat and Davide, and it would be Rabbi Jessica, the rabbi who was officiating, and it would be a simple, civil ceremony. And they would allow immediate family to be on this wedding, a Zoom wedding. So how do you do a Zoom wedding for your own child? I had no idea. I've never done a Zoom wedding for a child. And the wedding started at 9 o'clock on Monday night, 6 o'clock San Francisco time. And here's what I did. First of all, I got dressed actually in a suit and tie. And we turned off all the any device that made any noise, we turned off. And we were completely focused on blocking out to dial in. That's our son on the screen, and he's getting married in San Francisco right now. He's having a simple civil ceremony, the betrothal, the Erusin ceremony. They're going to exchange rings and exchange vows and leave the nisuin, the wedding itself, the marriage, the 7 blessings, and the ketubah, and the shattering of the glass. They'll do that some other time when it's safe to travel again in Italy. And Shira and I and Jordy were watching this in Massachusetts. Sam was watching it from Brooklyn. Nat's grandfather, our father-in-law, Arnold Goodman, was watching from Jerusalem. Davide's parents and his sister were watching in Italy. And as this wedding is happening on this screen, and we're sitting around our kitchen table, me in a suit and tie at 9 o'clock on Monday night, I realized Brooklyn, Newton, Jerusalem, Italy were in a very real way all Hineni in a backyard in San Francisco, where two young men who love one another were getting married. And all I can tell you is, we never would have picked this off the menu. But it was so beautiful, we don't even have words. There were a lot of tears. When it was done, and we were unpacking all night, we all said that it could not have been more poignant, more life-affirming, more beautiful if it had been an old-fashioned pre-pandemic wedding with lots of people and fancy venue and fancy food and fancy band. Just the simple thing, love, commitment through the years, was the real deal. So beautiful in its own way. So here's what I want to say to you. Rosh Hashanah is coming. And the way we're going to do it, nobody would have ever picked off the menu. No matter. Our Rosh Hashanah next week has the potential to be absolutely amazing. It only takes one thing. It only takes you. Block out, dial in, and find your own way to say, Hineni, I am so here. Shabbat Shalom.